welcome to the second week of the Cuddle Monster Crochet Along Together. This week we're going to be finishing up that body, sewing down the eyes and mouth. I'm going to show you everything you need to know as far as assembly goes. So make sure you've got a copy of this week's pattern on hand and we'll get started. Once you've completed round 10, you'll have done all of your increases, and then we'll just be doing single crochets in the round up through round 24. But at this point, this is kind of what your piece should look like. We've kind of gone round and out. And your tail may be sticking on the other side of your work. You can just pop that through with your crochet hook if you'd like. Just kind of tuck it in there and it can stay inside. Because once we close it up, no one will see in there. But so yeah, as you can see, even though I'm working with this orange, you really cannot see it at all. Can't see any stitches, nothing. But as you continue to work, just make sure you use a stitch marker and count your rows. At this point, it should be pretty easy because you should just have 60 stitches around. And if you find that you're off and you need to increase or decrease a little bit, that's okay. It's not really going to show up all that much. And I have to say, with all the monsters that I've made, there's been a little bit of fudging somewhere at some point. It just is not easy to see all of your stitches here, and sometimes you can accidentally work 2 stitches in the same one or accidentally skip a space. So don't worry about it. It's normal. It's not really going to show up in the ending piece because it's so fuzzy. You're not going to see something as simple as a missing stitch or a little bit extra stitches in one area, as long as you get yourself back on track when you notice that you're off. After you finished round 24, your piece should look a little bit like this. You flatten it out, it's kind of a semicircle. And we're ready to start doing the decreases. So we're just decreasing in the way that we increased before. So for round 25, we're going to single crochet 2 together and then do a single crochet in each of the next 8 single crochet around. Now you don't have to count your stitches this time, but we are repeating the brackets 6 times around, and you'll know if you're off if after you do your decrease and you're supposed to do 8 single crochet, if you can only get 7, or if for some reason you have 9, and you'll use that to adjust and make sure your stitch count is right at the end of the row. So just a refresher on how to do a decrease, and again, it's kind of hard to see your stitches, so you're going to have to kind of feel and go with your gut instinct. But you put your hook in, pull up a loop, put your hook in the next stitch, pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through everything. And so you'll see this is where it's really easy to get off because you worked into, it's kind of hard to see, but bear with me, this stitch and this stitch. So you may feel yourself wanting to go in here, but that's actually part of your decrease, so you want to make sure you go into the next one and not the one you just worked into. So we'll do 8. And then another decrease. So I'm just trying to push this yarn out of the way to see if I can get a better visual on my orange yarn here. So we've got going in this one and pulling up a loop, and the next one and pulling up a loop. Yarn over, pull through everything, making sure to work into the next single crochet. And you'll just decrease in this manner until you get to row 30. Before row 30, we're going to sew the eyes on. After you finish round 29, it's time to sew on the eyes and the mouth and then add some stuffing. So we've mostly got our shape here, and all that's left is a little bit of rounding and closing it off. And you kind of want to know that. It'll give you an idea of where to place your eyes and your mouth. On mine, we've stopped probably about right here. So on mine, I've chosen to kind of center, like if you say this is the center of where we're working, pretend there's a nose there, place the eyes above and the mouth centered below, and you can choose how far apart you want the eyes to be. These are a little bit closer together than this one's a little bit further apart. Again, it's all up to where you'd like to place your eyes and your mouth, but we're going to go ahead and sew them on before we close up the top of our monster. So I like to put my beginning of the round in the back, but you can place your eyes wherever you'd like. Oh, and also put your removable stitch marker on your working loop so that it doesn't come undone while you're sewing. And be careful and conscious while you're sewing not to sew through the back of your piece and not to sew into your working yarn. So I'm going to start with my left eye. And you can kind of place them on before you start sewing to get a good idea of where you want your pieces to be. So that looks about right. And remember, we're going to have feet down here, so you don't want the mouth too low. And we're also going to have horns up here, so you don't want the eyes too high. So I'm probably going to go for something about like that. You could pin the pieces in place if you'd like, but I like to just work one piece at a time. It gives me room to move things around if they don't end up laying the way that I thought they would or I had planned. I like to sew down with the white part of the eye first, and then go back and sew those eyelashes down with the black. So make sure you tuck all your little ends behind your eye. And when I sew my eyes down, I'm kind of tilting it up here so that I make sure I can sew it in place up and down. I do as we did earlier when we sewed our highlights in. Nope, and I don't want to sew that tail in. Get that out of the way. I come up and grab those two top stitches. And I just work my way up and down along those two top stitches as if you're going to single crochet into them. Also, as you're sewing, you may have to move some of that eyelash yarn out of the way. It wants to get sewn into the eyes, but if you do that, it doesn't give you a very clear distinction of where the eyes are. And I like the nice, clean, bold edges. So I just kind of brush it out of the way as I work. And again, as you sew, check every now and then how your piece is sitting in relation to the rest of your pieces. Like I can already tell right now I was sewing my eye a little too high because I wouldn't be able to sew my eyelashes down because I haven't worked that far yet. So I have to make sure I pull it down a little bit and reposition. Now that I've gotten the white sewn down, I'm just going to go back with the black and sew this eyelash edge down and sew these eyelashes down in place. You can choose to leave yours to move freely if you'd like, but I like to sew mine down in place. When you're done sewing your eye in place, you can just leave the tails free on the inside. Now, you can see on this eye that I've stitched down that some of the caribou has come through as I was stitching, and I don't really like the way that that looks. I like the cleaner, sharper edges. So you can go ahead and just, with a pair of scissors, trim those little pieces of caribou away. So you'll just want to repeat the same thing for the other eye, taking care of its placement in relation to the eye that's already attached. And as you sew, make sure that you're checking every so often to realign. If you've got eyelashes, you kind of want them to start and end in the same area. Again, we don't want our eyes too close together. I wouldn't go any closer together than this. And make sure you keep brushing that caribou out of the way as you sew. After your eyes are sewn on, it's time to add the mouth, and you'll just want to center it and lower it and kind of get an idea of what placement looks best. You don't want to put it too high and have it overlap the eyes. You don't want to put it too low and it end up being on the bottom of your monster. So kind of just a happy middle spot. You may find it helpful to turn your piece as you're sewing as well. And so you can see right here I kind of have this weird curve. I'm just going to take my piece of mouth right here with my needle, pull it out, and then push my needle down to sew it a little bit further out, and it's going to kind of close up that space. So if you need to do a little bit of stretching to sew in place, feel free to do so. And after you've got the mouth on, then it's time to add some stuffing. You can add any stuffing of your choice. You can do some polyfill or some clean wool or even scrap pieces of yarn. So I'm going to get my stuffing. Now when stuffing the monster, I like to kind of fluff up my stuffing and put it in. You know, make sure you don't want to lose your working loop as you stuff. Then when I put it inside, I can put my hand in the middle and open it and push the stuffing out. Kind of creates like a hole in the middle as the stuffing goes out. And I kind of repeat that process until I've got it nice and full. And as you add the stuffing, you can start to see the shape of your monster forming. Once you've got a good amount of stuffing in there, we can move on to round 30 and we'll finish up the monster. Don't worry, in a couple rows we can add more stuffing if you feel like it needs some. And then afterwards we can go ahead and trim up this caribou to give a little bit more distinction to the features we've sewn on. Once we have our face sewn on in place, we can continue on with round 30 through the rest of the body to close up the top of the head here, or the top of the body. So you're going to single crochet 2 together and then single crochet in the next 3 single crochet around, keeping track to count your stitches as you go. You may have to fluff out some of the caribou as you go. It may have gotten stuffed to the inside when you stuffed it, and you want to try to keep that stuff on the outside. Then you're going to continue on to round 31, which is single crochet 2 together, single crochet in the next 2 single crochet around. Make sure to move your marker at the beginning of the round and count your stitches as you go. So after round 32, we're not going to be able to put much more stuffing in once we do the next round. So you kind of want to feel how cuddly your monster is. If he's losing his shape too quickly, you're going to want to add more stuffing, but you don't want to stuff it so tight that it's as hard as a rock. Some amigurumi you would like to do that for, but for this one, I want you to be able to cuddle it and squeeze it. So I would recommend that you don't stuff it too full, and you can kind of push down in there and see, you know, how much room. I'm actually going to add just a little bit more stuffing to mine, but how little or how much stuffing you put in your monster is going to make a pretty significant impact on its overall shape and function. So go for full to hold its shape, but not so firm. You want to be able to cuddle it, and you can see when I squeeze it, the stuffing starts to come out of the top. So what you can do is you can overstuff it a little, and then when we close this section up, when you squeeze it, the stuffing will refill in that area. So I'll do just a little bit more. And actually, as I'm squeezing it, I feel it's kind of empty back here in the back. So I'm going to push some to the back. And I don't know if you can tell, but I've kind of got a gap here now. So I'm going to add just a little more. I don't want it understuffed, because if it's understuffed, it will fall flat in areas. And while you want them squishy, you still want them to hold shape. Once you're happy with the amount of stuffing in your monster, you can move on to rows 32 and 33, and I'll show you how to close it up when we get to the top. So after you finish round 33, it will look mostly closed, but you and I both know there's a little hole in the top. So we're going to cut a long tail, and I choose to use both Simplicity and Caribou when I sew in the top. So cut a long tail for both. You're going to want to thread this through a tapestry needle, and we're going to sew those last 6 stitches shut together. Okay, so I like to go through the working loop to secure that shut. And kind of put your finger in the hole to open it up and feel for those stitches. And I'm going to go through the first 2. And then the next 2, kind of going down through one and up through the next. And then the last 2. And if you pull tight, it should cinch all 6 stitches together in kind of a tight ring. And then after that, you can do it again to fully secure it if you want. And kind of, if you sew some of that caribou fur in, pull it out, because we don't want to have kind of a bald spot on the top of our head. But you can go through again. And then when you're done, you can just near where you came up out of the head, but not in the exact same place, but close. Go in and find somewhere in your monster to come out. Now you don't want to lose your needle, but you want to go through the monster and pull. Just enough to get it in, but not so tight that you actually create a shape in the monster. And what this is going to do is it's going to kind of leave a long tail inside your body. And then you can snip your end and kind of squish your body into shape. Then it's time to move on to the horns.
Alright, so at this point you should have a little body with eyes and a mouth. Feel free to share pictures over in the Cuddle Ravelry group. I'd love to see your progress so far. And of course, feel free to ask me any questions you have during the process. And then we'll be ready for next week.